Okay, this is exponential decay part 2. So the first one we did is they gave us the half-life and the initial amount, and we found out how much it was after a certain number of years. This time they gave us the half-life and how much there is after a certain number of years, and we have to find the initial quantity. So it's the same question, just that we're missing, each of these is actually the same question. We're just missing a different piece of the information each time. So for my algebraium, I have the same half-life. It's 1620, let's say. And I don't know my initial, but I know after so many years. So again, what formula am I going to use? I'm going to use my PERT formula. Okay? So for this guy, we're going to plug in the stuff that we know. And what we really need to know is the rate. But we don't know the rate. So we're actually going to solve for that first. So the first thing I'm going to do is plug in the information that's given and see if I can find out enough information to answer this question. So in order to solve for the rate, I'm going to use actually this column information first. I'm going to use the half-life. So this says, in 1620 years, I'll have half my original. So that's what half-life says. So in 1,620 years, I'll have half of whatever my original was. Now, I don't know what the original is, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make up an original amount because it doesn't matter how much it was. And we kind of discussed that when we did the Mathonium one. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, let's say I started with 1 gram of something. I know that in 1,620 years, how much is going to be left is a half of it because that's half as much. And now, since exponential growth and decay talk about percentage and not amount, it doesn't matter what I choose. If we started with 100, right? Let's just do a couple of these. Let's say that we started with 100. Up, and so that means we got down to 50 in half the time, right? The next step would be to divide by 100. And what would this simplify to? 1/2. Let's say our initial amount was 200. It doesn't matter what we pick. Then this one would be 100, right? Half-life would mean this one would be 100. My first step would be dividing. What's this fraction going to be? It's going to be a half. It doesn't matter since we're talking about ratios here. It doesn't matter what I pick as my original amount. I'm just going to pick a 1 and a 1/2. Okay? Because that's what's always going to happen. I'm going to end up with a 1/2 there if we're talking about half-life, right? All right. So, and the time we do know, so I'm actually going to fill that in. It's 1620. Okay? And that's given in my original question, the half-life. All right. Now let's see if we can figure out what this rate is. And I shouldn't have worked so far out here, so I'll move over a little. So this says 1/2 is equal to E 1620R. So I just rewrote what I had above. Now I need to get at this R up here. So this is where I use my natural log of both sides. And if you don't know what I'm doing here, then you should look at the previous video, the exponential decay section 1, and it will help you, I discuss more thoroughly about what's happening here. So now I'm going to use my log rules and stick this out to the front. And now we know that this whole thing simplifies to a 1 because it says, what do I have to raise E2 to get an E? And that's going to be a 1. So this is like multiplying with a 1. Okay? So that leaves us with ln 1/2 is equal to 1620R. And I think we came out with the exact same thing last time because we had the same exact half-life. So again, watch the previous video if you're not sure. And so R is going to be equal to whatever this is. Now, I'm actually just going to use this. I'm just going to change this to 0.5 just to make it easier. But I'm actually not even going to find what the decimal value of that is because I'm going to use this number in my calculator at the end anyway. So I'm just going to leave him just as he is. I'm going to leave him just like that. All right, now let's go back to what our original was. It's asking me to find that initial amount, and it tells me that after 1,000 years, I have 1.5 grams left. So now remember, the equation that I have now with this information, now that I found R, is that B is equal to P, I don't know. E is a given, I do know that one. I know that my rate is ln 0.5 over 1620, and we have a t. Okay, so now this is my new equation. This is the equation I'm working with. I just found out the rate. Now, I'm going to get the time from my original question because it says after 1,000 years, this is how much I'll have. So what two things can I fill in here now? I know that it's 1,000 years and I will have 1.5 grams. So this will be a 1.5, 0.5 over 1620 times 1,000. And now I'm going to plug all this into my calculator. Just one more thing that I have to do, right? What am I trying to solve for? I'm trying to solve for this guy. So really what I'm going to do here is I'm going to divide both sides by this. I'm going to have 1.5 over e to the ln 0.5 over 1620 times 1,000. Okay? Now, again, if you are a person that has a hard time typing all this into the calculator, we can do it in pieces. So I'm going to do this little bottom piece first, and then, actually, let me zoom out so you can see the calculator a little better. I'm going to do this little bottom piece first, and then I'm going to worry about the bigger fraction. Okay, so I'm going to do e, clear all this out so it's not as confusing. So I'm going to do my second key and get this e to the something. Do you see it? So I'm going to do in parentheses natural log, so that's ln 0.5, or you can type in 1 over 2, right? Divided by 1620, and then I'm going to close my parentheses, so that represents this first fraction. And then I'm going to open my parentheses and put in 1,000 and hit enter. Now I'm just going to store that with my store button, and I'm going to store it as just A. I usually pick A because A is, the one that's right there. And then we're going to do 1.5 divided by A, because A represents this whole bottom piece. I just saved A as that and hit enter. And this gives me a 2.30097. So it's saying my original amount was 2.3 grams. Let's see if that kind of makes sense with our original. So they're saying if we were going 1620 years, we would have half as much as our original. So this should be a little more, like it should be more than half of this, right? So what's 2.3 divided by 2? 1.15. So this number kind of makes sense with the information that we were given. Okay, so all of these are the same. You're just figuring out what the rate is, basically. You're plugging all your information into the equation that you know, and you're solving for the thing that you don't know. It doesn't matter which one it is that you don't know. You are just basically plugging numbers into a formula. Okay, and sometimes you have to read. They won't have them in a table. They'll say the initial amount and they'll say the half-life in sentences instead. But they're all the same question. All right, we'll try the next one on the next video.